Chapter 4. This is specific training for nutrigenetics, which basically is all about eating healthy based on your genes. And there are big differences from one person to the next. Now, the DNA Nutri-Control program has two functions. So one is the weight sensor, which is all about how can I lose weight and maintain weight easily. This is not part of this training. There's another training for this. And this part is all about the nutrition sensor, where you find out how to eat healthy based on your genes. And both of them can also be ordered together. That's when you have the DNA Nutri-Control package. And now we're talking about the nutrition sensor part. It's all about a genetically healthy diet. Now, let me explain the concept. Generally, people think they know what a healthy diet is because eat a lot of fruit and eat low fat, low calories, and that's healthy. However, unfortunately, it's not as simple as this. Let's just look at these three genetic diseases. One of these people is lactose intolerant, can't digest milk, sugar. One of them is gluten intolerant, so reacts bad to wheat protein. And one of them has an iron overload disorder, meaning that he absorbs too much iron from food, which could cause a problem. So these three things are genetic diseases. Now, a nutritionist comes along, opens his generalized book, and he says dairy products are a healthy source of calcium. So dairy products are healthy for you, which is true. They contain a lot of calcium, which is good for bones. However, for a lactose intolerant person, that's pretty much the worst thing you could do to him, to make him eat lactose. For this person, due to his genetic tendency, lactose containing dairy products are not a good idea. He should eat other sources of calcium, such as broccoli. For the gluten intolerant person, it's not a problem. And also for the iron overload disorder person, it's absolutely true. There's lots of calcium, it's healthy. It's a healthy type of food for these two people. Then the nutritionist goes on and says whole grain bread is healthy. It's got a lot of fiber, it's good for digestion. Now, it's absolutely true for a lactose intolerant person. A person that's gluten intolerant is going to have the worst digestive problems, and the person with iron overload disorder, again, is absolutely good. It tastes good, and it's good for digestion due to the large amount of fiber. And red meat is low-fat red meat is a good source of iron, so that's healthy, especially for people with iron deficiency. Absolutely true for lactose intolerant people and gluten intolerant people, but people that do absorb much too much iron from food, where it can become a problem, a good source of iron is not a good idea. So what this shows is these are just three different genetic diseases and three different nutritional advices. And really, just by combining them, you can find that everyone reacts to everything differently. So it's very difficult to find one recommendation that would apply to everyone the same. And that's exactly the problem with generalized recommendations. And this is what nutrigenetics promises. The ability to look into your genes, find out what your genetic variations, genetic risks are, and to change your nutrition to counteract these effects. And some critics say nutrigenetics is going to be the future, however, it's too soon. There's no nutrigenetic information yet. However, what they tend to fail to see is that nutrigenetics is part of so many people's lives already. For example, lactose intolerance. It's the most common food intolerance in Europe. 1 in 5 people is lactose intolerant and will also have very strong side effects from a lactose-rich diet. So what they do is they don't eat lactose because of their genetic variation. So they are already nutrigenetically modifying the diet. Same goes for gluten intolerance. And so it's not a new story, not a new concept, this nutrigenetics. It's something people have been doing for thousands of years. It's only now that we don't have to wait for the symptoms to arise, but we can do all of these genetic tests and we can modify the nutrition to adapt the genes. It's just a new level of nutrigenetics. but it's the same concept that has been around for a long time. All right, so let's look at the concept of nutrition and genetics. We have a number of genes, or we have a number of environmental influences or unhealthy aspects of our lives that do pose a health risk. And nature is structured in such a way that if it knows there's a toxin or something, it tends to find a way. And we have a number of different genes that protect us from these environmental risks. Let's have a look at a few examples. Oxidative stress, that is when free radicals are produced. These are toxic chemicals that damage the tissue and cause aging, for example, and they can also cause cancer. So you need protection from oxidative stress, and that's why we have some genes like GPX1 and SOD2 that protect us from this oxidative stress, and so we are protected. And too aggressive immune system, so the body's own defense system, could damage a lot of the tissues. That's why we have some genes that keep the immune system in check and say, don't be too aggressive, just fight against the bacteria. So again, the tissues and cells are protected. Homocysteine is kind of like cholesterol. Having a high level in blood is bad for heart health. And so nature said, oh, we need to regulate this, and there's some genes which keep the homocysteine amount in blood under check, so that they don't allow the homocysteine to go too high. So again, heart health is protected. And then there are a number of toxins, heavy metals, and so on, that can go into our body, and that could cause cancer or toxicity symptoms. And again, nature has said, okay, we need to do something about this, and we have genes that remove this, recognize these toxins, remove them from the body, and protect our body. So there are a lot of problems that could arise in our bodies, but there are genes that are protecting us from them. So far, so good. The problem is only that genetic variations in these genes are very common. So what happens if there is a genetic variation in one of the genes protecting us from oxidative stress? Then we lack this protection, and the free radicals do a lot of damage to our tissues. They increase aging of tissues and can cause cancer and everything. Then if the genes for homocysteine regulation are defective, they don't do their job, homocysteine can increase. It can be a very bad effect for our heart health, and again, we are not protected. And if the genes that are necessary to remove toxins from our body are defective, then the toxins are not removed. They can cause cancer, lung cancer, and all sorts of problems, and again, we're not protected. All right, so genetic variations can disrupt protective functions in our body. So far is understood. However, there are certain micronutrients which can help restore some of these functions. Now, let's look at this in more detail. Oxidative stress, as I said, these are free radicals, toxic chemicals that damage the tissue. There are, however, antioxidants, which you might have heard about. And antioxidants are certain vitamins, vitamin C, E, alpha-lipoic acid, and so on, and different substances that can grab onto free radicals and neutralize them. So, if we don't have the protection from the genes, we can counteract it with higher amounts of certain antioxidant vitamins that can then counteract the free radicals. So by having a healthy nutrition with more antioxidants, we can help balance out this genetic deficiency that this person would have. In homocysteine regulation, homocysteine would be maybe too high due to genetic variations. However, folic acid or folate, vitamin B6 and vitamin B12 have been shown to be efficient in lowering homocysteine again. So if the genes don't keep check on it, we can do it with certain micronutrients that we find in food. And then removing toxins. If heavy metals such as lead is not removed from the body, calcium, iron, and selenium have been found to bind certain heavy metals and remove them from the body. Doesn't mean that if there's an acute lead poisoning that taking a calcium supplement is going to help, There you need a chelation therapy, which a doctor needs to mediate. But low levels of lead have been shown to be reduced with an increased calcium intake. So with certain micronutrients, certain things we find in food, we can balance out certain genetic deficiencies that we have. And this here is a summary. This is a very big genetic test. We test for 52 different genes. There is a training where I do counseling for the person that has done the genetic test. I would recommend you to go through this because this will really tell you all the details. Here I'm focusing on the concept, to explain the concept of nutrigenetics to you, so you have some background understanding. But do watch the training or the personalized counseling for people that have done the nutrition sensor. It's going to really help you explain things in more detail. Now, what we look into is bone health for one thing. So bone health, the osteoporosis risk has things to do with calcium, vitamin D and magnesium. All that's the good stuff, and the bad things are phosphate. They extract calcium from food, and cysteine and methionine, amino acids, they also make bones weaker. So we know things that are good if you have a high risk and things that we should avoid. Then eye health, it helps in prevention of macular degeneration. Heart health, it helps control cholesterol, specifically with omega-3 fatty acids. That's a very interesting story, which we are going to go into later. And homocysteine with folic acid, vitamin B. And food intolerance like lactose and gluten intolerance. Joint health, rheumatoid arthritis, there omega-3 is helpful. Metabolism health, iron overload disorder, where you get too much iron, needs to modify how much iron you get. Mental health, such as Alzheimer's disease, we need more antioxidants. And detoxification, for heavy metals, we need more calcium, selenium and iron to improve detoxification of heavy metals. Alright, let's first look at oxidative stress, because it's a very interesting topic. Around 5% of oxygen that we breathe in is converted into a free radical called superoxide. Now, nature has known that this is a very damaging molecule and has given us defenses against it. And if the superoxide is produced outside the cell, the SOD3 gene produces the SOD3 enzyme or protein that converts it to a less potent free radical. Hydrogen peroxide is still a free radical, but that is then processed as well. So it's important to do this conversion to then get rid of the free radical. That's outside the cell. The SOD1 gene and protein does it in the cytoplasm, so inside the cell. And then we've got these kind of powerhouses, the mitochondria, where superoxide is also converted into hydrogen peroxide. And this is actually where most of the superoxide is produced. But thankfully we have the SOD2 gene that protects us from it. However, unfortunately, some people have a genetic variation here that disrupts the function of this gene. And what happens is superoxide is produced, it's not neutralized, and it damages the cell, the mitochondria, and ultimately the tissues, and increases the aging process. Now, this here is a cutout from the report. So you will see this kind of information in the report. This is the science behind it. Now, I usually wouldn't go too far into detail with this with customers. This is really for doctors or scientists that want to check up on what we're claiming. This is a good thing to check up, but I'll quickly go through it with you. This is just for the SOD2 gene. And the first part explains what the gene does, then the 3 different types. If you don't know what this kind of table means, please do watch the simple disease risk statistics training and the general concept of genetics, because that will explain why the 3 different genotypes. It just means you have 2 copies of this gene, this genetic variation is what we're looking at, and both copies have a C. Or both copies might have a T, or one of them might have a C and one a T. So that's the 3 options that we have. And here you see that 20% of the general population of everybody else around you has a CC genotype, 53 have a CT genotype, and 27 a TT. And you see 20% have this good protection, 53 have at least one of them being active, still some protection but less, and 27%, so almost a third of the population, don't have this protection against superoxide in mitochondria. So what do we do if we know that there's a genetic variation? There's no way to fix this gene, unfortunately, not yet. So what we can do is use higher amounts of these antioxidants to help fight against the free radicals. That's a little more complicated because vitamin E is fat soluble, so it would only do the protection in the membranes, but the overall concept is understandable. All right, so the logic is we test the SOD2 gene. If it produces the SOD2 protein, we know you need normal amounts of antioxidants, the normal recommended daily allowance, and your cells are going to be protected. However, if there is the genetic variation that modifies this gene, then no SOD2 protein is produced, you're lacking this protection, and we're going to counteract it with higher amounts of these vitamins and so on. So now we know you need higher amounts of vitamin C, E, A, and so on. How should you cover them? How should you make sure that your body has all of these nutrients? And of course, the right answer is always through a healthy nutrition. And for example, antioxidants you can get through eating more fruit. They have lots of antioxidants, and also vegetables, specifically the colored vegetables. Then if you need more omega-3, you can find it in sea fish. If you need more calcium, you find it in milk products as well as broccoli. If you need less iron, you should avoid red meat. It has a lot of hemoglobin in it. Or avoid alcohol, because that also increases your iron amounts. And if you should have less heavy metals, you should avoid maybe sea fish that tend to be higher in the food chain and have a lot of heavy metals in them. And filter feeders such as shellfish will also have accumulated more heavy metals. So you should eat less of them if your body cannot remove them so much. So the aim of this nutrigenetic program is to find out what should you eat more of, what should you avoid based on your genetic profile. And this here is the food table in the end. So this is what you would find at the end in the report. It's around 1,000 different types of food. And every one of these types of food, we know how much calcium is in there, how much omega-3 fatty acids, how much vitamin A, and so on. And we evaluate all of these substances. Then we check out how important this substance is for you based on your genetics and how important this substance is. And then in the end, we evaluate, does it have more good stuff for you and less bad stuff? Then we would recommend this type of food, or the other way around, then we would not recommend it to you. And the way it is recommended, you will find here. So if we zoom in a little, you see these smiley faces here. So, for example, generally fish or octopus meat has lots of smiley faces, happy smiley faces, because it contains a lot of substances that for this particular person is healthy. It's different for a person with other genes. Cod liver in this case has a lot of negative stuff and some positive stuff, and in the end they kind of balance each other out, so it's neither healthy nor unhealthy. And you can just see that some types of food are more healthy for you and others are not. And the aim is to just go for eat more things with happy smiley faces and avoid the ones with red smiley faces. In this example you don't see any, but there might be up to 6 red unhappy faces, which means it's very unhealthy for you. So it's very easy to follow these recommendations by just going through and checking out what you can eat and what you should eat more of. Then back here you see the content. So this here means octopus meat, a standard amount would be 150 grams. This means the standard serving that you would get on a plate if you ordered fried octopus or something, then you would have 150 grams on average. In those 150 grams, you would have 123 kilocalories, 24% protein, 3% carbs, and 1% fat. Not percent, sorry, grams. And this is basically the main things that carry energy. But then we know that it contains a certain amount of cholesterol, a certain amount of vitamin A, a certain amount of vitamin B6 and B12, a certain amount of calcium and so on. And we are looking at up to 40 different types of ingredients, good stuff as well as bad stuff. We look at the genes, and then we ultimately decide if this is good or bad for you. Now, for every type of food, there are more than 200 to 500 different calculations being done in the background. So you can't just say fruit is healthy because everybody says fruit is healthy, but some fruits might contain some things which are not good for you. And other fruits might contain things that are very good for you. So you can't just put all fruits in one basket, so to speak, but you have to evaluate every different type of food based on its constituents. Now, here you will sometimes see red numbers and green numbers. It just means if it's green, it's healthy. If it's red, it's bad for you. And this is not genetically adapted. This is the same for everybody. It just says out of all of the types of food, if it's green, this contains something that is healthy and contains particularly much of it. And if it's red, it's the opposite. This is unhealthy, and out of all the types of food, this type of food contains particularly much of this unhealthy type. So it gives you some insight into why something might be good or bad, but there is a lot more going on in the background. We need to consider all of the different calculations to, in the end, decide if this type of food is good or bad for you. Because nutrigenetics is not a small look into one direction. It needs to consider all of the genetic risks, all of the aspects, all of the ingredients of a type of food to be able to deliver what it promises. All right, now this nutrigenetic program comes in different versions. We always test the same genes. It's more than 50 different genes that have influences on cardiovascular health, on diabetes, on iron overload disorder, Alzheimer's disease, and so on. However, we don't believe in communicating medical information without the guidance of a physician that explains it to you. This is why we have different versions. So while we always test the same genes, and we always find out you have a high risk of osteoporosis, that's why you need more calcium. In some cases we communicate you have a high risk of osteoporosis, that's why you need more calcium. In other cases we say due to your genes you need more calcium. So the person in the end does the same recommendations, he just one time knows about the disease and other time he does not. And this makes a difference between a medical genetic test, where you need medical counseling, medical guidance. In some countries it's illegal to do this without a doctor, and this is also what we suggest. However, in some other cases, when it's just a genetic test to improve your nutrition, it's a lifestyle genetic test, which not necessarily needs the counseling of a doctor. And this here is what it looks like in the lifestyle version. So you still see the genes, you still the genotype, but you don't find out this is a high risk for LDL cholesterol and so on. So we have it in different gene groups. If you ask what does this mean, you just say this is the laboratory result, just like when you do a blood test, you see lots of numbers, you don't know what they mean. And this program is going to, the next pages are going to explain to you what it means to you, because this is very technical. You need to be a scientist to analyze it. And this is the end of the chapter for nutrigenetics, eating healthy based on your diet. This was supposed to make you understand the concept why people react differently to different types of food. And there is a much more elaborate training with this personalized training session that we have. This is another video that's actually aimed at the customer. So you can look through this. This goes through it in very much detail. The medic version, the one that communicates the diseases, will tell you a lot about what kind of different diseases do we look at, what information do we get from it, and how does this factor into the recommendations of food. This was meant to give you an understanding that everybody is different and people react differently to different types of food. And that's generally the concept of nutrigenetics. And as I said, I would recommend that you also watch the personalized counseling for people that have done this genetic test to find out a lot more about this test.